Hey, welcome back. This is Shah. I wanted to go over a clip from Doug Wilson, and he's I don't know if you'd call him a tradcon, kind of, but he's a priest, and he's reacting to a clip from the Whatever podcast about Michael Knowles kind of grilling Brian about why he doesn't want to get married. And this was sent to me from Darth Sidonius. Thanks for the email, and I appreciate you sending this clip over. So let's go and watch it together.
You don't want to get married?
No.
No. Why not? Uh-oh. All right.
Yeah,
Bad location.
All right, 1v7, okay. Well, so I'm not opposed to necessarily having a life partner, but there are certain, I'm sorry, Michael. There are certain realities when it comes to marriage that, from the male perspective, make it seem risky.
To your point, Brian, you make a good amount of money. The way the judicial system works, if a woman divorced you, she could take a bunch of your money, she could take your kids. So there's a risk. But my question is, if you're already going to have a life partner, which sounds, I'm sorry to say, kind of gay, like it's not gendered, it's not traditional.
Thank you for saying that.
It's just if you're going to do that anyway, but you want to protect against divorce, why not just marry a woman who's not going to get divorced?
Well, if it was only that easy, that's basically selling, what Coach Greg Adams calls the hope strategy. And it was kind of what Officer Tatum tried to prescribe for Brian in the last reaction video I did with Officer Tatum grilling Brian for the same thing. But we know that it's not that easy to pick them nowadays.
Or get a prenup.
Literally. So you're saying, like, well, if you find a great woman that that's
not even just that. I'm saying, because you could find the most wonderful woman in the world, and then I don't know, someday something goes off in her brain and she totally turns on you. But what if you create the structures such that you're not going to get divorced? I'll give you an example. I'm Catholic. My wife and I cannot get divorced.
I've got news for him. Happens all the time.
She could murder me. That would be her way out of the marriage. But it is not possible for us to get divorced.
This guy, Doug Wilson, he's I don't know what he was too much, but I watched through this once, and he seems to be like he's a priest, I think. So he's coming from the religious world, and it's nice to see his reaction to a claim like that, because Catholics can get divorced. Maybe religiously speaking, they're not supposed to scripturally, but in the land we live in, they can and do get divorced.
Yeah, basically all you have to do is leave the Catholic Church. And in many places, you don't have to leave the Catholic Church to do it. It's just ignored. He's saying you can't be a good Catholic and get divorced. But this whole point, this gent here is talking about the risk when other people don't behave. Let's say you're the true blue guy. What do you do when your wife turns on you? What do you do if your church doesn't back you up? What if you do if the judges are corrupt and they don't back you? What do you do? That's a reasonable question.
But is that why you don't want to get married? Because you're afraid of the divorce potentially?
Afraid of women.
Why not just date another successful woman?
Do you have trust issues?
No, he's not afraid of women. He's afraid of women and the legal system. He's afraid of the state of marriage and divorce law.
One of the women kind of said something in the background. She was like, why don't you just marry a more successful woman? And I swear to God, that's probably like the best shielding you can have to a really bad divorce. If you're going to be this red pill dude or whatever, I don't know why the red pill doesn't advise men to specifically seek out women that are financially successful and go throw the game down on them. Like, oh, you're a pharmacist, you're a nurse, get married to her. And when the divorce comes, it's going to be a hell of a lot easier.
Brian?
Wow,
it sounds like
you have trust issues.
It's just Michael and the girls here intervening with you, Brian.
Like, if you dated another successful woman, wouldn't that fear kind of disappear?
That's kind of interesting. I'm glad she asked that.
No, I think that's probably increases the odds against him.
It does increase the odds that a divorce will happen. I think that's what he's saying statistically. However, what I'm saying is when that divorce happens, it's going to be a lot more equitable in how the shares and the assets divide, because a no-fault divorce is essentially signing a 50-50 on that.
I don't see the benefit.
This is why I asked, don't you want a wife?
Of having
It's
a companion?
I can have a companion and not be married. And I'm not a fan of the government, so I don't want the government involved in my love
But if you
Do you
live
want
with
children?
someone more than 10 years, you're gonna
Be
it's
legally
gonna be
married.
legally.
It's common.
Not-
The problem with his libertarian appeal right here is that in Scripture, marriage of necessity creates property and custody issues. And the magistrate is the one appointed by God to adjudicate property and custody issues. King Solomon adjudicates the custody dispute between the two harlots. It is not tyrannical or overreach when the civil magistrate has to determine who owns what. And marriage necessarily creates those sorts of situations. So it's not possible to simply have a purely contractual arrangement.
So I don't have anything against for other people. That's great. I've sort of looked at the numbers. I've done the calculus, and to me it seems like, here, I'll put the math here. I've done the math. 50% of marriages end in divorce, and the stats I've seen, 80% of divorces are initiated by women. And so when I say it's bad for the man, divorce. The negative consequences of divorce typically tend to disproportionately impact men. They can impact women, but I think 97% of alimony payments go from men to women. So,
And the reason for that is because men are typically marrying women that make less than them, and women typically are marrying men that make more for them. If you were going to get married with the current laws, I think the best strategy would be to marry a woman who makes as much, if not more money than you. And, then that can help shield a bit from the harshness of a divorce, at least financially speaking. Paternity speaking, you can still get screwed over with certain laws that just by virtue of you being a man is going to make it tough for you to deal with. If somebody wanted to be very realpolitik, and this is not ethical, but you could marry a woman that makes money, and then, if you're going to be this red pill guy who's kind of amoral and very Machiavellian about it, spin plates on the side while you're married to this other woman who's a pharmacist, and then get best of both worlds. You're essentially employing the gold digger strategy here. I can see the red pill strategy evolving into that one if the marriage laws aren't reformed.
I think that one of the things he's pointing to, and this is a good time to insert this, is that he's articulating his reluctance. He's doing so kind of courageously with his table surrounded by women, where he's saying he doesn't think that marriage is good for men. But there are a lot of men who are on strike when it comes to marriage. They're on strike in a similar way, and for all these same reasons, but they're just not writing letters to the editor about it. They're not talking about it publicly, but they are responding to the disincentives that our legal structure has created. And so one of the pressing pastoral problems that many conservative ministers have is churches that have a lopsided ratio of the women, older women, unmarried women who want to be married, vastly outnumbering the men in their age cohort. And I think this is because of the social dynamics he's talking about, at least in part.
That's actually really interesting to hear, and I think that's why it's cool to hear like a priest or someone who's more involved in the church giving their opinion on this, because he's talking about pastoral problems or things that they're seeing from the church's side, where they have all these kind of career women over there and they're having trouble getting married. My question is why doesn't the church advise these women to marry men that are making less money than them, right? So these women that are in that age cohort and they have great careers, go seek out a guy that has less than you and get married. Will they do that, or do they not want to be at the mercy of the courts once they do that? You know what I mean? It's like the church has all these people that are sitting there. They know it's a problem. They see it's a problem from their end. Counsel the women to do that.
Brian, who hurt
Most
you?
prenups in
Yeah.
Like,
Ooh,
okay,
okay.
let me ask
Like,
you a
I feel
question.
like you're always
yeah.
worried about like something gonna happen bad. Like, when would you
Something
just
going wrong.
like?
Now, the thing that is that's quite striking here is that his reasoning, which makes sense to a lot of men, appears to be just sailing over their heads, where they're saying, but what about love? Or they're operating with a different calculus.
You have no trust and faith in
But
these
I think
women.
it's this.
Well, that's what he's saying. Your argument can't come back, you have no trust or faith, when his argument is, I have no trust or faith that this is going to go well for me. You can't respond by saying, your problem is you have no trust or faith. Yes, his point exactly.
Society we live in now.
Well,
'Cause
let me
there's
ask
so
you a
much
question.
But also, like,
Let me ask you a question. So how many people get married and they think, hey, this is the person I love, we're going to be together forever, and then you hear that divorce rate, it's like 50% of marriages end in divorce.
I think when people get married very young, right?
But isn't that the best time to get married?
Not
Well, Michael,
necessarily.
your thoughts on that?
Some of them.
You're like an exception.
I didn't get married young though. I've only been married now about 5 years, but I should have gotten married younger. It's one of my quasi regrets in life. But some of the best marriages I've ever seen were people who got married 20 years old or 22 or 23 years old. I just wonder, Brian, if because all the objections you're raising are completely legit.
Sure.
I just wonder if you are looking at an alternative that doesn't really exist, that's illusory. Because if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to have more freedom if I don't get married, I don't know if that's true. You know, if you're always in one of these situations, even if you're just dating, where you think, well, where are we? Where do we stand? Is he going to leave me? Is this that? Is that? In a marriage, in a proper marriage, all that is gone. And so you think, I had a bad day, I got in a fight with my wife, I didn't do the laundry, whatever. Doesn't matter, especially if you believe in marriage like marriage really is.
But that's especially if you believe in marriage. The whole problem with our society is that very few people do believe in it that way. Of course, if you have a man and a woman who, for religious reasons, believe that the grounds for divorce are very limited and specified by God, and that unless those conditions are met, you're married. Well, but how common are those people? I don't think they're as common as Michael thinks they are.
You know, and that is kind of similar advice to, well, if you guys are both very spiritually grounded in your religious framework, whatever that happens to be, then you shouldn't have to worry about the family law system to begin with, because then you guys shouldn't be divorced. And that seems to be the advice mostly coming from the tradcons. The funny thing is about this video is I took a look at the comments, and like every single comment under this video, except for like a few of them, are guys that were like, hey, I met my wife at church. We were in the church group together. She cheated on me with the assistant pastor or the pastor or whatever. And we'll look at some of those comments after we finish the rest of this.
You say this is an institution defined by real things. I made a covenant before God and the political community. I signed up with the government. They're going to take my money if I break this covenant. And that actually, it seems like it puts limitations on you.
I don't know how he can like confidently say that. It's just, okay, he's making this argument that by leveraging everything you have and putting it on the table, it makes the commitment stronger, yet the statistics are completely against him in that way. We know it's the opposite.
Brian's whole objection is they could take my money if I don't break the covenant. That's the issue. Of course, if you make a covenant, there should be a cost if you're the one who breaks covenant. Brian's whole problem is that the system is rigged. I might have the money gone whether or not I break covenant. The other person could be the covenant breaker, and the system is rigged. That's his complaint.
I actually really like this gentleman, Doug Wilson. His at least I appreciate his ability to view the other side's, hang-ups with this whole thing, and he's doing a good job of describing it. And essentially, in that sense too, he's kind of highlighting the problem of no-fault divorce, where before no fault, two people are signing this contract, and if one breaks the contract, they're forfeiting their claim, at least the majority claim, to the marital assets. So if your wife goes and cheats and breaks up the marriage and leaves, abandons, you're the injured party, and you have more of a claim to the marital assets, like the house and custody of the kids and all this kind of stuff. Right now with no fault, you can do everything right, not cheat, do everything, provide, be a model husband. If she decides she's not happy anymore and she leaves, has an affair, does whatever, there is no fault assigned, and it just splits 50-50 down the middle, which is Brian's complaint.
It gives you a ton of freedom, because you can think, oh, I'm here, we're in this. There's no getting out. There's no way out but through, and so we're just going to make this thing work. I find it's a very freeing experience.
It is a freeing experience if you're dealing with Christians who believe in a covenant-keeping God and who believe in the scriptures and who attend church faithfully and who are, marriage is the best. But the non-believing world doesn't know how to be married. That's the problem. Brian, I think you're raising all the right questions. These are all reasonable questions, but you can't find answers to them in an unbelieving society. Basically, if you're dealing with the foundational presuppositions of unbelief, your calculus works. You're going to be lonesome at the end of the day, but the calculus works, and you kept your money. But you don't want to be lonesome at the end of the day and have lost your money too. That's your argument. You need to come to Christ.
I respect Doug Wilson and what he's saying, and I do appreciate the religious community. And ultimately, he's saying if you're dealing with someone who's not going to carry these religious values, then you're not going to find a good long-term answer there. And he's basically saying that the thing I noticed too is that Red Pill has a lot of good answers for people, but they're all kind of limited to the short term. Red Pill and the whole self-improvement mantra and all this stuff is just about increasing your short-term prospects. And this could be over a long period of time, but you're just increasing short-term prospects with people. However, there's no answer to the long-term question of family and kids. It doesn't really provide one. The tradcons have one, and that's pretty much couched in the religious framework. However, there's a lot of corrosive acid that's thrown on that from the incentivization of divorce through our current secular family law. The tradcons are basically offering an answer to let's go back to religious theology to fix this. However, in my opinion, I don't think that could work because we live in a society of so many different religions, people who aren't religious, and all these kinds of things. So I'm more on the side of there needs to be an overhaul of family law in order to accommodate the culture we're in now, to try to craft a new long-term solution to what we're dealing with, to incentivize both men and women to want to get married. If we're going to look at specific laws, that could be things like caps on spousal and child support, custody hearings that are taxpayer funded in the same way that child support hearings are. Also updates to paternity laws. If right now in California, if you're married and your kid's over 2, you guys are getting divorced. The kid's 4 now. If you find out the child's not biologically yours, too bad, you're on the hook. I think men should have first right to say, I don't want that paternity status anymore. Have my ex-wife use the child support agency to go after whoever the affair partner or whoever is the real father of this child. We have genetic tests now. So I think there should be updates there so men don't get trapped into being a father to a child that they aren't biologically the father of and that they don't want to be. Anyways, let's just take a look at some of the comments on this video before I let you guys go. All right, so here's some. I met both my ex-wives at church. The first one threatened to kill me in my sleep, and the second one divorced me after 27 years of marriage because she wasn't happy. Both of them are faithful Christians who go to church every Sunday. I'm glad that Mr. Knowles has a happy marriage. I married a very pious Christian woman who divorced me without any moral compunction at all. She even said very flippantly that, quote unquote, God will forgive me. There are women out there that worship happiness over God's law. A coworker of mine related the story of a man who married a solid Christian woman. After only a few years, divorced him. Her congregation helped remove all of the possessions in his house while singing Bringing in the Sheaves. Not far from where I currently live, a guy came home early to find his wife in bed with the pastor. I held them both there in bed and staring down the business end of a shotgun until her mother had time to arrive at the scene. My question, how many of these incidents would an otherwise intelligent man need to be aware of before he writes the institution of marriage off as a fool's errand? It's interesting because this channel is primarily geared towards religious Christian folks, and seeing the comments under that video is particularly enlightening. There's one more comment I want to share, and it's from Darth Sidonius, who sent me this clip, and this was the comment that really spoke to him. Just to add another anecdote, I am a Christian who married my high school sweetheart. After 2 decades, she left me for someone else, who was an assistant pastor. She, thankfully, left the kids with me. I did not file for divorce, idealistically hoping for reconciliation. 2 years later, she filed for divorce and tried to take everything and demanding full custody. Thankfully, since she had been nearly entirely uninvolved with the kids, the court didn't give her full custody. Instead, we have shared legal custody, and they now spend about 30% of the time with her. I pay her child support. Okay, so he has the kid 70% of the time, and he's paying her child support. And here's the quote from the courts. So the children won't be scarred by seeing their mother less well off than their father. Yes, that's a quote. And she received more than half of the family assets. So mom just decided to leave for whatever reason, be gone for a couple years. Life's not panning out for her. She's not doing as financially well, but the courts are like, listen, even though you have majority custody, we still want you to pay child support so that her household at least has some more money for when the kids go back and forth, and it looks kind of quasi-normal between the households. The system has serious issues, and marrying religiously offers no protection. It's true that a wife who truly follows Christ wouldn't do this, but I, and many others, know of no reliable and practical way to discern a true God-loving woman from a socially God-loving woman. And the consequences of being wrong speak for themselves. So this goes against the Michael Knowles, the Officer Tatum prescription of finding a woman who's, a good religious person. And this isn't to pick on Christianity or one particular religion. It's just, the video is from the Christian perspective. But how do you, where is the goalpost here to distinguish between who a true God-loving woman is and who's a social, like someone who pretends to be a God-loving woman, or at least doesn't prioritize that higher than their own personal happiness? By the way, I'm not claiming to be some special flawless husband, just that my flaws are honest and comparatively speaking mild, and don't justify betrayal, oath-breaking, false testimony, or any of the rest of what happened. And I know that I'm far from the only one in this type of situation. So I thought that was a fascinating clip, and I thank Darth Sidonius, hope I'm pronouncing that name right, for sending that over to me. It's interesting to see a Christian pastor view on this kind of whole thing, especially one that's just so measured and well-balanced as this guy Doug Wilson's was, because a lot of the tradcons kind of just tend towards, the same old answers. And it seems like this guy Doug Wilson is more about trying to effect some sort of change. So anyways, let me know what you think down below. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We'll see you on the next one.